Resuming page 16, part 22. Special status, out-of-body experience. Although human consciousness can, with enough practice, move beyond the dimension of time-space and interface with other energy systems in other dimensions, the entire process is appreciably enhanced if that consciousness can be detached in large measure from the physical body before such interface is attempted. Once an individual becomes proficient in the technique of out-of-body movement and then reaches the point where he is able to break out of the time-space while out of his body, he gains the advantage of, quote, clicking out, end quote, part of his enhanced consciousness, while starting from a base located much closer to the dimensions with which he wishes to communicate. In other words, since he is starting from a point much, quote, higher up, end quote, to use an analogy from the time-space context, that part of his consciousness involved in, quote, clicking out, end quote, will have that much more time to interact in dimensions beyond time-space, because less time is required to traverse the intervening layers. Moreover, once the individual is able to project his consciousness beyond time-space, that consciousness would logically tend to entrain its frequency output with the new energy environment to which it is exposed, therein greatly enhancing the extent to which the individual's altered consciousness may be further modified to achieve a much heightened point of focus and a much refined oscillating pattern. As a result, a self-reinforcing process should ensue whereby the farther consciousness in the out-of-body state can be projected beyond the time-space dimension, the more its level of energy output would be enhanced, thus promoting the potential for still further travel. The tentative conclusion to be drawn is that the out-of-body state may be regarded as an extremely effective way of accelerating the process of the practitioner of the gateway technique. Of accelerating the process of enhancing consciousness and of interfacing with dimensions beyond time-space. If the practitioner of the gateway technique has a choice of concentrating on achieving and exploiting the out-of-body experience, as opposed to concentrating his full efforts on expanding his consciousness exclusively from a physical base, the former would appear to promise much faster and more impressive successes than does the latter. Section 23. Absolute in perspective. It may be helpful at this point to pause and recap. End of page 16. Beginning page 17. The major aspects of our intellectual journey from time-space to the realm of the absolute. We have spoken at some length concerning the incredibly complex hologram which is created by the intersection of energy patterns generated by the totality of all dimensions of the universe, time-space included. We have noted that our minds constitute energy fields which interact with various aspects of this hologram to deduce information which is ultimately processed through the left hemisphere of our brains to reduce it to a form that we employ for the process we call thinking. We have implied that this hologram is the finite embodiment in active energy form of the infinite consciousness of the Absolute. It is the title we assigned to that vast pool of energy in a state of perfect rest, over which the physical universe is layered, and from whence it comes. Incidentally, to describe this, Bentov uses the analogy of a very deep sea, comparing the still depths of the sea to the dimension of the absolute, while assigning the storm-tossed waves above to represent the physical universe with which we are familiar. The slightly agitated currents of the sea to be found in between the turbulent surface and the totally still depths represent energy in the process of either going into rest, i.e. approaching infinity, or coming out of rest. 24. From Big Bang to Torus. Working from the widely accepted, quote, Big Bang, end quote, theory, Bentov presents a conceptual model to depict the process of time-space evolution, the relative position of the universal hologram. That hologram is often called a, quote, torus, end quote, because it is thought to have the overall shape of an immense self-contained spiral, basing his thesis on recent studies concerning the distribution of quasars, quasi-stellar objects, and operating on the premise that in the universe, smaller processes tend to be mirror images of larger ones, i.e., the pattern of electrons around the nucleus of an atom mirrors the way planets orbit their suns, and so on. Bentov postulates the following scenario. Taking his cue from the observed capability of quasars to eject enormously concentrated beams of matter from their interiors in a controlled, non-concentric version of the, quote, Big Bang, end quote, he envisages a similar process occurring in the generation of the universe. See Exhibit 4, next page. Noting that those galaxies located to the north of our own galaxy are moving away faster than those located to the south, and that those to the east and west are demonstrably more distant. Bentov regards this as substantive evidence that the jet of matter which expanded into our universe as substantive evidence that the jet of matter which One moment, I'm going to read that again. Bentov regards this as substantive evidence that the jet of matter which expanded into our universe has turned back upon itself, eventually forming an ovoid or egg shape. He sees, quote, matter, end quote, in our universe entering the ovid pattern following ejection from a nucleus composed of extremely compressed energy through a, quote, white hole, end quote. At the end of its trip to the far end of the ovoid, he sees it departing via a, quote, black hole, end quote. In such a model, time is observed to be a measure of the change which occurs as energy evolves into new, more complex forms as it progresses along the distance from the white hole side of the nucleus around the shell of this, quote, cosmic egg, end quote, until it enters the black hole. In other words, as energy expelled from infinity and confined within limits by the conscious of the absolute, achieves form and motion following ejection from the white hole at the top of the egg, time begins as a measure of the cadence of this evolutionary movement as, quote, reality, end quote, goes around the shell of the egg on its journey to the black hole at the far end. 25. Our place in time. The observed distribution of galaxies suggests that our particular universe is located near the top of the egg, at the point where matter begins to fall back on itself, thus explaining the reason why the galaxies to the north are seen to be moving away more rapidly as they are caught up in the downturn of the stream of matter towards the far end of the cosmic egg. See Exhibit 5. Next page. Layered over this cosmic egg is the absolute, which sustains the radiating nucleus, from which the original jet of matter issued forth. As the stream of matter moves around the ovoid toward its destination at the black hole, where it... End of page 17. Skipping page 18 temporarily to resume the reading on page 19. Will be reabsorbed into the radiating nucleus, and then the absolute. It generates the interference pattern within the cosmic egg, which constitutes the universal hologram, or torus. Since the torus is being simultaneously generated by matter in all the various phases of, quote, time, end quote, it reflects the development of the universe in the past, present, and future, as it would be seen from our particular perspective in one phase of time. By reflecting on this model, it becomes possible to, quote, see, end quote, how human consciousness brought to a sufficiently altered, focused state could obtain information concerning the past, present, and future, since they all exist in the universal hologram simultaneously. In the case of the future, because all of the consequences of the past and present can be seen coming together in the hologram, such that the future can be predicted or, quote, seen, end quote, with total accuracy. Moreover, it is possible to see how the implosion of energy patterns would cross and recross to create an incredibly complex four-dimensional hologram, or torus, in spiral shape, in reflection of the multi-dimensional developing pattern of evolution. All of the movements of the energies which comprise the universe leave their mark and hence tell their story throughout time. Pausing the reading to return to page 18. So, at the very top, there is a box with an image, mostly black or dark shade, and toward the center you have a space. It's kind of circular, and it's white. And to the right of it you have an arrow pointing into the black shade, and to the right of it it says jet of matter. Underneath it says figure A, photograph of quasar emitting jet of matter. Underneath that you have this diagram, and underneath the diagram it says figure B, diagram of the cosmic egg. So and on the top it says direction of time-space evolving, and it's shaped like an oval. There's a mostly solid line going around in the shape of an oval. If you can see it because you're watching on video, you can see it. If you're listening, or if I'm listening to this later, it's an oval-shaped entity, and you have arrows going in both directions. Really, you've got the center, the furthest right part, but toward the center of the egg, and then the furthest left part, but toward the center. I don't know how to better pronounce that, but you've got a shaded area, and then the arrows from top to bottom kind of going toward that. And anyways, toward the middle, the top portion, you have universal black hole and then universal white hole. So it seems like the universal black hole and the universal white hole are next to each other or colliding. I'm not sure, I don't know, but I'm not very good at describing this stuff. But to the right there's a note that says point where flow of time space turns toward opposite pole of ovoid. Okay, so there's a pole, or there are poles to this. I'm going to move on from that. So figure C, stylized rendition of a simple torus. Okay. So the link to this document should be in the description. Otherwise, just do a search in the search engine like Google, analysis and assessment of the gateway process, or gateway process is a 29-page document. Go to page 18 and you'll find this, as long as they didn't modify or remove anything. So I'm gonna move on from page 18. Actually, there's a note on the bottom. It says figures A and B from Bentov, stalking the wild pendulum. Quote unquote. Fig C, Peirce, the mystic spiral. Okay, so I'm going to move on back to page 19 and continue from part 26. Quality of consciousness. We noted earlier that the out-of-body state involves projection of a major portion of the energy pattern that represents human consciousness, so that it may move either freely throughout the terrestrial sphere for purposes of information acquisition, or into other dimensions outside of time-space, perhaps to interact with other forms of consciousness within the universe. Consciousness is the organizing and sustaining principle that provides the impetus and guidance to bring and keep energy in motion within a given set of parameters, so that a specific reality will result. When consciousness reaches a state of sophistication in which it can perceive itself, its own hologram, it reaches the point of self-cognition. Human beings have this form of elevated consciousness, as does the Absolute, but in case of the latter, it is a function of energy and its associated quality of consciousness in infinity, omniscience and omnipotence in perceptual unity. When energy returns to a state of total rest within the Absolute, it returns to the continuum of consciousness in the pool of limitless, timeless perception that resides there. Thus, the more complex an energy system in the quote material end quote state, the more consciousness it possesses to maintain its reality. Our consciousness, therefore, is that differentiated aspect of the universal consciousness, which resides within the Absolute. It accounts for the organization of the energy patterns which constitute our physical body, but is distinctly separate from and superior to it. Sense consciousness exists quite apart from and outside of reality. Beyond the bounds of time-space, it, like the Absolute, has neither beginning nor end. Reality has both a beginning and an end, because it is bounded within time-space, but the fundamental quantum of energy and its associated consciousness is eternal. When reality ends, its constituent energy simply returns to infinity in the absolute. (27) Consciousness in perspective. Having ascertained that human consciousness is able to separate from physical reality and interact with other intelligences in other dimensions within the universe, and that it is both eternal and destined for ultimate return to the Absolute, we are faced with the question, so what happens then? End quote. Since memory is a function of consciousness and therefore enjoys the same eternal character as the consciousness which accounts for its existence, it must be admitted that when consciousness returns to the Absolute, it brings with it all the memories it has accumulated through experience in reality. The return of consciousness to the Absolute does not imply an extinction of the separate entity which the consciousness organized and sustained in reality. Rather, it suggests a differentiated consciousness which merges with and participates in the universal consciousness and infinity of the Absolute without losing the separate identity. And end of page 19. Skipping page 20 to resume the reading on page 21. Accumulated self-knowledge, which its memories confer upon it. What it does lose is the capability for generation of independent thought holograms, since that can be done only by energy in motion. In other words, it retains the power to perceive, but loses the power of will or choice. In exchange, however, this consciousness participates in the all-knowing infinite continuum of consciousness, which is a characteristic of energy in the ever-present. Consequently, it is accurate to observe that when a person experiences the, quote, out-of-body state, he is, in fact, projecting that eternal spark of consciousness and memory, which constitutes the ultimate source of his identity, to let it play in and learn from dimensions, both inside and outside the time-space world, in which his physical component currently enjoys a short period of reality. Pausing the reading on page 21 and returning to page 20. So it's, on page 20, it's just one big diagram of what may be a torus field. On the bottom it says Exhibit 5 from Bentov, Stalking the Wild Pendulum. So it's sort of oval shaped, except not sort of oval or egg shaped, you could say, but it's tilted and leaning more, you could say, almost standing from the skinny side. You could think of like a typical oval where, never mind, but within the torus field you have the galactic north, galactic south. Our galaxy is what you'd see in this diagram. It's toward one of the poles of the torus field, and then from one of the poles you have these arrows from the left into the right side, going around it toward what I assume to be the other pole. And then from the other pole, or near so, you have an arrow going in toward the white hole and the nucleus, and to the two sides of it you have a torus. You have torus and torus. And then from the white hole you have an arrow pointing straight upward toward the opposite pole, which you would have the galaxy, our galaxy as they describe it. Relative position of our galaxy in the universe. So that's what this diagram is supposed to be. It has it typed out, but of course being overlaid by the approved for release note by the CIA. So you can check it out for yourself. Returning to page 21. Okay, part 28. Gateway method. Having put the gateway experience in context by postulating a structural outline of how and why it seems to work, and having shown what it is designed to achieve, the time has come to examine the specific techniques which comprise the gateway training process. These techniques are designed to enable the user of the gateway tapes to manipulate the high energy states which can be achieved if the user continues to work with the tapes over a period of time. The amount of time required to reach advanced energy states and to fully exploit the techniques varies with the individual. The sensitivity of his nervous system, his general state of mind, and the extent to which he may have previously developed facility in related techniques such as transcendental meditation are all pertinent factors affecting the speed at which he may expect to progress. The gateway process begins by teaching the individual participant to isolate extraneous concerns in a visualization device called an, quote, energy conversion box, end quote. Next, the participant is introduced to a method of encouraging his mind and body to strive to a state of resonance through utterance of a single tone, a monotonous, protracted humming sound that sets up a feeling of vibration, particularly in the head. He engages in this, quote, resonant tuning, end quote, as it is called, by humming along with a chorus of such sounds that are contained on the gateway tape. Following this, the participant is exposed to the gateway affirmation and is encouraged to repeat it to himself as he hears it repeated on the tape. This affirmation is a statement to the effect that the individual realizes that he is more than merely a physical body, and that he deeply desires to expand his consciousness. Hemisync introduced. After that, he is exposed for the first time to the hemisync sound frequencies, and is encouraged to focus on and develop a perception of and appreciation for those feelings which accompany the synchronization of brainwaves that result. Next comes the technique of progressive and systematic physical relaxation, while the hemisync frequencies are expanded to include additional forms of, quote, pink and white, end quote, noise, designed to put the physical body at the virtual threshold of sleep, as well as to calm the left hemisphere of the mind, while raising the right hemisphere to a state of heightened attentiveness. Once all of this is achieved, The participant is invited to envisage creation of an, quote, energy balloon, end quote, comprised of an energy flow beginning at the center of the top of the head and extending down in all directions to the feet. The energy involved in this flow then proceeds up through the body and back out into the balloon pattern again. The, quote, energy balloon, end quote, which sets up a pattern very reminiscent of the cosmic egg discussed earlier, not only enhances bodily energy flow and encourages early achievement of a suitable resonance state, but it is also designed to provide protection against conscious entities possessing lower energy levels, which the participant might encounter in the event that he achieves an out-of-body state. It serves a precautionary purpose in the unlikely event that the participant's first out-of-body experience involves direct projection outside the terrestrial sphere. End of page 21. Beginning page 22. 30. Advanced techniques. Having reached focus 10, the participant is now ready to endeavor to achieve a state of sufficiently expanded awareness to begin actually interacting with dimensions beyond those associated with his experience of physical reality. This state is called Focus 12 and involves conscious efforts on his part, while additional forms of, quote, pink and white noise, end quote, enter the sound stream being directed into his ears from the gateway tape. Once the participant has achieved this state of greatly expanded awareness, he is ready to begin employing a series of specific techniques or, quote, tools, end quote, as the Monroe Institute characterizes them, which useful feedback of value for promoting self-discovery and personal growth. The specific techniques involved are described individually below. A. Problem solving. This technique involves identifying fundamental problems which the individual wishes to see solved, filling his expanded awareness with his perception of these problems, and then projecting them out into the universe. In this way, the individual enlists the assistance of what Monroe Institute calls his, quote, higher self, end quote. In other words, his expanded consciousness, to interact with the universal hologram to obtain the information required to solve the problem. This approach may be used to solve personal difficulties, technical problems in the realm of physics, mathematics, etc., practical administrative problems, and so on. Responses to the problem-solving techniques may be received almost immediately, but often they come based on developing intuition over the next 2 or 3 days. Frequently, the response comes in the form of a sudden, holistic perception, in which the individual suddenly finds that he simply knows the answer in all of its ramifications and completely in context, sometimes without even being able to put his newly found perception into words, at least initially. In some cases, the response may even arrive in the form of visual symbols, which the individual will, quote, see, end quote, with his mind while he is in the Focus 12 state, and which he will have to interpret after he returns to normal consciousness. B. Patterning. This technique involves use of the consciousness to achieve desired objectives in the physical, emotional, or intellectual sphere. It involves concentration on the desired objective while in a focus 12 state. Extension of the individual's perception of that objective into the whole expanded consciousness and its projection into the universe with the intention that the desired objective is already a matter of established achievement, which is destined to be realized within the time frame specified. This particular methodology is based on the belief that the thought patterns generated by our consciousness in a state of expanded awareness creates holograms which represent the situation we desire to bring about and, in doing so, embellish the basis for actual realization of that goal. Once the thought-generated hologram of the sought-after objective is established in the universe, it becomes an aspect of reality which interacts with the universal hologram to bring about the desired objective, which might not, under other circumstances, ever occur. In other words, the technique of patterning recognizes the fact that since consciousness is the source of all reality, our thoughts have the power to influence the development of reality in time-space as it applies to us if those thoughts can be projected with adequate intensity. However, the more complicated the objective sought and the more radically it departs from our current reality, the more time the universal hologram will need to reorient our reality sphere to accommodate our desires. Monroe trainers caution against attempting to force the pace of this process because the individual could succeed in dislocating his existing reality with drastic consequences. Section C, color breathing. The next technique is called color breathing and is end of page 22, beginning page 23. Designed to use the expanded awareness and highly focused attentiveness associated with the focus 12 state to imagine various colors in a particularly intense and vivid manner so as to use them to resonate with and in turn to activate the body's own energies. Fundamentally, in terms of practical application, it is a healing technique which is designed to restore the body and to enhance its physical capabilities by balancing, revitalizing, and retuning bodily energy flows. It is predicated on the principle that the body's electromagnetic field is capable of altering its resonance pattern so as to entrain energy from the Earth's electrostatic field for its own use. The various colors envisaged in the imagination as part of the technique cue the mind as to which frequencies and what specific amplitudes are desired in connection with this entrainment and the subsequent alterations in bodily energy flow patterns. That color has the capacity to affect the human mind is well known, and the effectuality of color in certain kinds of healing is a demonstrable fact. For example, application of an intense blue light to an area of physical tumescence leads to relatively rapid and easily observable reduction in the swelling, while red, and to a lesser extent yellow, have quite the opposite effect. However, in the hemisync application of the technique, external light sources are not involved, but rather the mind is the sole agent of the healing and revitalization. Section D, Energy Bar Tool. Magic wands and enhanced scepters have been part of the folklore and occult practices of many cultures. The scepters, staffs, and maces carried by monarchs and high priests alike occur with such frequency in the history of bygone eras as to suggest that, at the very least, these items are aspects of some type of archetypal symbol which the human mind seems to appreciate, perhaps quite subliminally. In any case, the energy bar tool technique involves envisaging a small, intensely pulsating dot of light, which the participant charges in his imagination with enormous energy until it is virtually pulsating. The participant then extrudes the dot into the shape of a sparkling, vibrating cylinder of energy, which he then uses to channel force from the universe to selected parts of his body for purposes of healing and revitalization. E. Remote viewing. In addition, the energy bar tool is used as a portal for initiating a follow-on technique called, quote, remote viewing, end quote. In this context, the participant turns his bar of energy into a whirling vortex through which he sends his imagination in search of new and illuminating insights. The apparent purpose of the symbolism involved in the vortex seems to be to cue the subconscious and convey to it instructions as to what the participant wishes to do, but in terms of nonverbal symbols, which the right hemisphere of the mind is capable of understanding. F. Living body map. This technique provides amplification for application of the energy bar tool as a means of healing specific areas or systems of the human body. The configuration of the participant's body is imagined, and then the various major systems, such as the nervous and circulatory systems, are envisaged in appropriate colors within the confines of the outline being held in the imagination. The energy bar tool is then applied to energizing, balancing, and healing in whatever manner the participant desires. In the process, the participant visualizes various streams of colored energy flowing out of the tool into the organ system or area upon which the revitalizing or healing application is being made. Since colors are the result of differing wavelengths of light, which is to say, energy at various frequencies, this technique operates on the assumption that as the human body is composed of energy, it can be vitalized and healed through the additive application of additional energy, provided that the energy is applied in the appropriate form. End of page 23, beginning page 24. Section G. Focus 15. Travel into the past. All of the preceding techniques are conducted at the level of expanded awareness known as Focus 12. However, the technique of time travel into the past involves further expansion of consciousness through the inclusion of additional levels of sound on the hemisync tapes. Some of the sound is probably merely an intensification of the basic hemisync frequencies, being designed to further modify brainwave frequency and amplitude. Other aspects of the added sound patterns appear to be designed to provide subtle, almost subliminal suggestions to the mind as to what is desired by way of further expanded consciousness, so as to support the verbal suggestions and instructions also contained on the tape. Even the instructions are highly symbolic, with time being visualized as a huge wheel in the universe with various spokes, each of which gives access to a different part of the participant's past. Focus 15 is a very advanced state and extremely difficult to achieve. Probably less than 5% of all participants in any given gateway experience actually fully achieve the Focus 15 state during the course of the approximately 7 days of training. Nonetheless, Monroe Institute trainers affirm that with enough practice, eventually, Focus 15 can be achieved. They also state that not only the individual's past history is available for examination by one who has achieved Focus 15, but other aspects of the past with which the individual himself has had no connection may also be accessed. Section H, Focus 21, the future. The last and most advanced of all the focus states associated with the Gateway Training Program involves movement outside of the boundaries of time-space, as in Focus 15, but with attention to discovering the future rather than the past. The individual who has achieved this state has reached a truly advanced level. Except in unusual circumstances, it is probably not attainable except by those who have conditioned themselves through long application of meditation, or by those who have practiced long and hard through use of the hemisync tapes for a period of months, if not years. 31. The out-of-body movement. This remarkable phenomenon has been saved for discussion in detail until last, because of the interest which it occasions and special circumstances involved in its attainment. Monroe Institute stresses that the Gateway Program was not established solely for the purpose of enabling participants to obtain the out-of-body state, nor does the program guarantee that most participants will succeed in doing it during the course of the training at the Institute. Only one tape out of the many which make up the Gateway experience is devoted to the techniques involved in the out-of-body movement. Basically, these techniques are merely designed to make it easier for the individual to achieve the out-of-body state when his brainwave pattern and personal energy levels have reached a point that he is in apparent harmony with his surrounding electromagnetic environment, such that he feels that he has reached the threshold where separation is a possibility. To facilitate achieving the out-of-body state, Bob Monroe, the founder of Monroe Institute, is quoted in a recent magazine article stating that in order to assist the participant of the particular hemisync tape concerned with that technique employs beta signals of, quote, around 2,877.3 CPS, end quote, cycles per second. Since 30 to 40 CPS is considered to be the normal range for beta wave signals, those associated with the wakeful state, It is apparent that the Monroe Institute is convinced that the same heightened state of brainwave frequency output, which promotes altered states of consciousness, is also an important consideration in assisting in achieving of out-of-body states. The actual technique employed for separating from the body involve such simple maneuvers as rolling out, lifting out after the fashion of a telephone pole, wherein the individual separates in a rigid, head-first manner, such that he finds himself standing at attention at the end of page 24, beginning page 25, foot of his physical body, and sliding out through either end of his body. 32. Role of REM sleep. It is interesting to note that Bob Monroe informed the Gateway class that finished 7th May 1983 that an ex-trainer of his operating in Charlottesville, Virginia, found that he could guarantee out-of-body movements by bringing participants down into a rapid eye movement, REM, or REM state of sleep, and then use the hemisync tape technique. This may well be a function of the fact that most, if not all people, reputedly go into an out-of-body state during REM sleep. REM sleep is the deepest possible level of ordinary sleep and involves complete disengagement of the body's motor cortex functions from the neck down and nearly complete suppression of consciousness in the left brain hemisphere. The effect of this is to put the body in a state of complete stillness so far as the skeletal muscle structure is concerned, thereby further promoting the state of deep rest needed to eliminate the bifurcation echo. In addition, it leaves the right hemisphere of the brain free to respond to the instructions and suggestions contained on the gateway tape. However, use of the hemisync tapes at this point may be less a factor in actually achieving the out-of-body state than it is a matter of focusing the brain enough so that a residual memory of having naturally achieved an out-of-body state is carried into the waking state. Indeed, it may even be postulated that some dreams associated with deep levels of sleep are in fact functions of the same kind of altered consciousness involved in interaction with the universe that plays a role in all of the focus 12, 15, and 21 states described above. The difference between those states and the condition of the mind in REM sleep seems to be that the left hemisphere is almost totally disengaged in the latter experience, such that memory of what was achieved in the altered states of consciousness cannot usually be retrieved by conscious desire because the left hemisphere has no knowledge of its existence or its location in the right hemisphere. Although some people can be trained to remember their REM state dreams through intense conditioning in the waking state, but even that may be more a function of establishing pathways in the right hemisphere, which the left hemisphere can access following re-entry into the wakeful state, then it is an indication of any specific left hemisphere conscious involvement in the process during REM sleep. In any event, the three apparent conditions required for voluntary inducing an out-of-body state in most individuals seems to be 1. Achievement of a state of profound quiet in the body, such that the bifurcation echo fades and a resonance at approximately 7 Hz is established. 2. Synchronization of the two brain hemisphere wave patterns. And 3. Subsequent stimulation of the right hemisphere of the mind to attain a state of heightened alertness, which of course interfaces with brain hemisphere synchronization, but not until a sufficient level of enhanced frequency range has first been established to help achieve the out-of-body state. 33. Information collection potential. The information acquisition potential associated with the out-of-body state seems to attract the most attention from the standpoint of developing practical applications for the gateway technique. Unfortunately, although the out-of-body state can apparently be achieved by many people without excessive expenditure of time or effort, the purposes to which it can be put are currently limited by the fact that, although individuals in that state may travel anywhere on an instantaneous basis in either the terrestrial or other spheres, information distortion in the former context remains a major concern. To date, according to one of the trainers at Monroe Institute, numerous experiments have been conducted involving persons moving from one coast to the other in the out-of-body state to read a series of 10 computer-generated numbers in a university laboratory. Although most have acquired enough of the digits to make clear that their consciousness was present, none have ever succeeded in getting all 10 correct. This seems to be a function of the fact that physical reality in end of page 25, beginning page 26. The present is not the only holographic influence which the individual may encounter in an out-of-body state. There are also energy patterns left by people or events occurring at this same physical site being viewed. But from the past rather than the present. In addition, since thoughts are the product of energy patterns, and energy patterns are reality, it may also be possible that individuals encounter thought forms while in an out-of-body state, which mingle with physical reality and are not easily differentiated. Finally, as Melissa Jagger writes, there is another potential problem area in the sense that holograms can be viewed pseudoscopically, that is to say, inside or backwards, just as well as they can be seen in proper perspective. Some of the distortions occurring may ultimately prove to be traceable to this cause, because in the out-of-body state, an individual may perceive the holographic energy patterns given off by people or things interacting in time-space reality in a somewhat distorted form. '34. Belief system considerations. In 1967, Alexandra David Neal and Lama Yogden wrote a book entitled Secret Oral Teachings in Tibetan Buddhist Sects, from which the following quote is taken. Quote, "The tangible world is movement, to say the masters, not a collection of moving objects, but movement itself. There are no objects, quote, in movement, end quote. It is the movement which constitutes the objects which appear to us. They are nothing but movement. This movement is a continued and infinitely rapid succession of flashes of energy. In Tibetan, quote, Sal, end quote, or, quote, Shog, end quote, all objects perceptible to our senses, all phenomena of whatever kind and whatever aspect they may assume, are constituted by a rapid succession of instantaneous events, end quote. A classic description of the universal hologram is to be found in a Hindu sutra, which says, quote, in the heaven of Indra, there is said to be a network of pearls so arranged that if you look at one, you'll see all the others reflected in it, end quote. I have cited this quotation because it shows that the concept of the universe, which at least some physicists are now coming to accept, is identical in its essential aspects with the one known to the learned elite in selected civilizations and cultures of high attainment in the ancient world. The concept of the cosmic egg, for example, is well known to scholars familiar with ancient writings of the Eastern religions. Nor are the theories presented in this paper at variance with the essential tenets of the Judeo-Christian stream of thought. The concept of visible reality, i.e. the, quote, created, end quote, world, as being an emanation of an omnipotent and omniscient divinity who is completely unknowable in his primary state of being. The absolute at rest in infinity is a concept straight out of Hebrew mystical philosophy. Even the Christian concept of the Trinity shines through the description of the absolute as presented in this paper. The description of energy totally at rest in infinity fits the Christian metaphysical concept of the Father, while the infinite self-conscious resident in that energy providing the motive force of will to bring a portion of that energy into motion to create reality corresponds with the sun. This is so because in order to attain self-consciousness, the consciousness of the Absolute must project a hologram of itself and then perceive it. That hologram is a mirror image of the Absolute in infinity, still exists outside time and space, but is one step removed from the Absolute and is the actual agent of all creation, all reality. And the eternal thought or concept of self, which results from this self-consciousness, serves the end of page 26. Okay, so just to interject, the sentence isn't completed. It just stops there at page 26. But then when you go to page 27, it doesn't go to point 35 or 36. It just skips to 37. Then it goes to 38, the conclusion, and then there's some other sections from A to G. all the way H to L. That's page 28, and then page 29 is the bibliography. So I will just resume from what's left on page 27. Section, or point 37. Motivational aspects. It is a step-by-step procedure which involves repetitive practice of the techniques concerned, using each new insight as a means of penetrating farther during the next practice session. But the rate of progress is so much faster with the gateway approach than it is with transcendental meditation or other forms of mental self-discipline, and its horizons seem to be so much wider that the discipline needed to practice it would seem to be within the means of even the impatient, result-oriented, skeptical pragmatist of our society. Unlike yoga and other forms of Eastern mental discipline, Gateway does not require the infinite patience and total personal subservience to and faith in a system of discipline designed to absorb all the individual's energies over most of a lifetime. Rather, it will begin to produce at least minimal results within a relatively short time, such that enough feedback is available to motivate and energize the individual to continue working with it. Indeed, the speed with which an individual may expect to progress seems less a function of the number of hours spent practicing than it is a question of the speed with which he or she is able to use the insights gained to release anxieties and stresses within both the mind and the body. These points of energy blockage seem to provide the principal barriers to achieving the enhanced energy states and focus of mind needed for rapid progress. The more compulsive, the more, quote, uptight, end quote, the individual may be at the outset, the more barriers he or she will initially encounter to achieving a deep or immediate experience. But as the insights begin to come and the blockages begin to dissolve, the way ahead becomes increasingly clear, and the value of the gateway moves from the status of a matter of intellectual assessment to one of personal experience. 38. Conclusion. There is a sound, rational basis in terms of physical science parameters for considering gateway to be plausible in terms of its essential objectives. Intuitional insights of not only personal but of practical and professional nature would seem to be within bounds of reasonable expectations. However, a phased approach for entering the gateway experience in an accelerated mode would seem to be required if the time needed to reach advanced states of altered consciousness is to be brought within more manageable limits from the standpoint of establishing an organization-wide exploitation of Gateway's potential. The most promising approach suggested in the foregoing study involves the following steps. A. Begin by using the Gateway hemisync tapes to achieve enhanced brain focus and to induce hemisphere synchronization. B. Then add strong REM sleep frequencies to induce left brain quiescence and deep physical relaxation. C. Provide hypnotic suggestion designed to enable an individual to induce deep auto-hypnotic state at will. D. Use auto-hypnotic suggestion to attain much enhanced focus of concentration and motivation in rapidly progressing through Focus 12 exercises. E. Then repeat steps A and B following use of the auto-hypnotic suggestion that an out-of-body movement will occur and be remembered. F. Repeat step E to achieve facility in gaining out-of-body state under conscious control. Alter hypnotic suggestion to stress ability to consciously control out-of-body movement and maintain it even after REM sleep state ends. G. Approach Focus 15 and 21 objectives. Escape from time-space and interact. End of page 27, beginning page 28. Within new dimensions from the out-of-body perspective. H. Use multi-focus approach to solve problem of distortion in terrestrial information gathering trips. This approach involves the use of 3 individuals in the out-of-body state, one viewing the target object here in time-space, one viewing it at Focus 15 as it slips into the immediate past, and one viewing it at Focus 21 as it slips from the immediate future. Debrief all 3 and compare data gathered from the 3 points of view. If care is taken to ensure that the 3 all go out of body together in the same environment, their conscious energy systems should resonate in sympathetic oscillation. They can tune in to the same target on different planes, dimensions, with greater effectiveness. I. Encourage pursuit of full self-knowledge by all individuals involved in the foregoing experiments to enhance objectivity in out-of-body observation and thinking, and to remove personal energy blockages likely to retard rapid progress. J. Be intellectually prepared to react to possible encounters with intelligent, non-corporeal energy forms when time-space boundaries are exceeded. K. Arrange to have groups of people in Focus 12 state unite their altered consciousness to build holographic patterns around sensitive areas to repulse possible unwanted out-of-body presences. L. Encourage more advanced gateway participants to build holographic patterns of successful attainment and rapid progress for advanced colleagues to assist them in progressing through the gateway system. If these experiments are carried through, it is to be hoped that we will truly find a gateway to gateway and to the realm of practical application for the whole system of techniques which comprise it. End of page 28. Beginning page 29. Bibliography. 1. Bentov, Itzhak, Stalking the Wild Pendulum. New York, E. P. Dutton, 1977. 2. Ferguson Marlin, quote, Carl Pribram's Changing Reality, end quote. Human Behavior, May, 1978. 3. Gliedman, John, quote, Einstein Against the Odds, The Great Quantum Debate, end quote. Science Digest, June, 1983. 4. Jagger, Melissa, monograph, quote, the lamp turn laser, end quote. Monroe Institute of Applied Sciences. Faber, VA, undated. 5. Monroe, Robert A. Journeys Out of the Body. New York, Doubleday and Company, 1971. 6. Pierce, Jill, The Mystic Spiral, New York, Thames and Hudson, Inc., 1980. 7. Sanella Lee, MD, Kundalini-Psychosis, or Transcendence. San Francisco, Henry S. Dakin, 1976. 8. Stone Pat, quote, Altered States of Consciousness, end quote. The Mother Earth News, March/April 1983. 9. Tart, Charles T. Altered States of Consciousness, New York, Wiley, 1969.